So our first speaker tonight is Amanda Wilson. Amanda is the primary head teacher of one form entry primary school in Greenwich with over 20 years experience. She's also a qualified coach and is training in transactional analysis psychotherapy. I hope I got that one right. She's a track record of supporting teachers in securing those leadership roles. She's a founder of the first 100-day Head Teacher Conference, which is an annual event aimed at new and aspiring head teachers. I think is a brilliant idea. And she's going to take us through when to move on up, when to step up. Over to you, Amanda. You're on mute there.
Not good start, is it? Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Rachel, as well. And thanks, Ben, for inviting me to be a part of this event this evening. So knowing when to move on and when to step up. And I'm just going to take you through just a few thoughts that I have when I think about it and when I talk to my leaders, when I talk to those people that I coach, and when I talk to anyone basically who says to me, when is the right time? Because there's always a question that comes into our head at some point in our career. So the first thing I want to do is just look at the different types of role. So I've kind of got 3 or 4 different screenshots of the 2021 school workforce census. And the first thing to note is that there are these days lots of different types of role. And I think sometimes we can think there are only, head teacher, deputy head teacher, assistant head teacher, and that's it. But in this day and age, we find that there are so many different leadership roles that fall within and around these things that I'm mentioning here. So even within the middle leader role, you've got things like phase leaders, you've got, your subject leaders, you've got your curriculum leaders, you've got your ASTs in there somewhere. And so even within the middle leader role, there are lots of different avenues that you can go down. So I think one of the things to consider is when you are a class teacher, what is it you enjoy doing? And I think about myself when I started teaching back in 2002, and my degree was in computing. I really liked computing, and I was involved in a project in a school that I worked in Newham. And my first role was as a computing lead, or ICT coordinator, as it was back then. And I wanted to do that role because I liked computing. I like computers, I like technology, I liked all that kind of thing. And I thought, actually, for a role that I'm going to do and I'm going to do well, I've got to do something that I'm going to enjoy. And for me, there is no point doing anything if you're not going to enjoy it. So the first thing is to consider what you enjoy doing and what you think that you would be able to bring value to, because that will then determine what role you go for and what role you apply for. The next thing when it comes to senior leadership is looking at the leadership population. And again, this is sort of data from the workforce census. They kind of do it every few years. So this is the most up-to-date data. But if you look at the senior leadership population, I just wanted you to focus on the figures and the fact that there are lots of jobs out there. There are lots of leaders. And for me, some people always kind of think, okay, is there space for me? I think this graphic shows you there's room for everybody. It's about making sure that you are clear on what it is you want to do and where it is you want to go. And sometimes you're not clear. I had no clear roadmap. I had no clarity in terms of, I never planned to be a head teacher when I became a teacher. I never planned to become a head teacher when I became a deputy head teacher. I never planned to be a head teacher when I became a head of school. It was nothing that was in my plan. I didn't have a 5-year plan. I just about had a 1-year plan. I was kind of like, I enjoy my job. You know what? Something then struck with me in terms of, actually, I think I'm ready to move on to my next role. So I think sometimes we get this idea that we see people who are doing a role, they've been in post for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you think, I should be doing what they're doing. They're applying for an assistant head teacher job. They're applying for this leadership role. They're applying for that leadership role. For me, it's not about looking what everybody else is doing. It's about waiting until you know you are ready and in that place. Because if I had looked at what everyone else was doing, and if I'd have decided, okay, I can see my contemporaries applying for headship, I can see the people that I trained with or became an NQT with moving into leadership roles, I probably would have gone in at the wrong time. And as a result of that, I probably wouldn't have ended up being happy. And I probably wouldn't have learnt the lessons that I needed to learn along the way, because every role that I've done, I've learnt something new. And every role that I've done is giving me more and more preparation for the next role. So I think, you know, that the saying, comparison is a thief of joy. Don't allow what other people are doing to cause you to get caught off guard. The next thing I think is about, you know, the length of time that somebody's in a role, because again, sometimes we can think, okay, how many years do I need to have done assistant head teacher role or a deputy head teacher role or whatever role? And although, you know, this graphic shows that, you know, think, for example, the average, you know, the median time that somebody is in a leadership role is 18 years, or in a middle leadership role is 12 years, or, you know, been in education or until I become a head teacher is 23 years. Everybody is different. My old executive head teacher, she became one of the youngest head teachers I think she was the youngest head teacher in Greenwich at the age of 30. I've come into headship in my late 40s. There is no comparison. There is no right or wrong age. And I think sometimes we can get too caught up in how young we are, how old we are, how much experience we have. I think the key thing for me is where you are in your role. And so again, if we skip down to the next one, I think it's about recognizing that everybody has a different trajectory in their career. And for me, if we go down to the next graphic, ultimately you could either take all these things and really focus on them, or you could totally throw them out the window and think, okay, let me just focus on me and where I'm going. And so it's, as much as we've got all these graphics in the DFE, take the time to gather all the census data. If you put 5 head teachers, 10 deputy head teachers, 16 middle leaders beside each other, everyone would have a different story to tell about the journey that they've taken. If I think about my journey, it's been long and varied. So as I said at the beginning, I've been in education for 20 years. My first headship, my first teaching position for the next graphic was at, I feel like I'm doing those back in the day when they were doing it. Yeah, I know. Next slide, please. My first job was at primary school in Canning Town. Oh, that's where I became ICT coordinator, and I was there for about 5 years. My last year there, I decided I didn't want to be in a classroom. I applied for, I was going to apply for a job at another school, and my head teacher said, okay, what is it you're looking for? And I said, I'm looking for a PPA role. And so she let me have a PPA role. And then I decided, oh, let me see what's out there. And I left working in the school and started working for RM Education for 5 years. And they are a private IT company. They're still around, still going. They used to sell computers to schools. Probably remember them from back when you were at school, depending on how old you are. But I worked as an educational consultant for 5 years. I also wrote bids and for free schools and academies back in the day. So I did a very different role, but still in school. And then because of redundancies, I decided to go back into school, and I went back in. The plan was to go in as an assistant head teacher, but I went back in as a deputy head teacher at Christchurch Primary School. And then after 3 years, and I was happy as a deputy head teacher, and my plan was to retire as a deputy head teacher. I would have been perfectly happy in my one form entry primary school doing the job that I enjoyed doing. But an opportunity came up for me. And initially, I wasn't going to take it because I thought, you know what, I'm happy where I am. But then I thought, actually, it's probably the fear of the role that stopped me more than anything. I was more than capable. And so I took the role at the next school as a head of school, and I was there for 2 years. And then the experience that I gained in that role made me consider, when I went to see a friend who was a head teacher, why I wasn't applying for headship. And it was at that point on the Friday, I went to see my friend who was a head teacher. And on the Monday, I was telling my executive head teacher that I was going to apply for a headship role. All very quick. The Monday before, I had no intention of applying for a headship role. And suddenly by the end of the week, things had changed. And that's what's happened. And I think sometimes we can be so concerned with doing it in the right way that we forget it's according to whether we feel we're ready. And one of the things that I think we need to consider is the job specification and the person spec. And I always say, you know, when you're ready, if you can meet at least 80% of the person spec. And so it's about looking down the list at what is this role asking you to do? What do you have already that you can tick off and think, right, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, I can't do that. Because sometimes we think we need to be the full package. Sometimes we think we need to have all the skills in order to apply for the role. And nothing can be further from the truth. And I say that from my own experience, because when I applied for my deputy headship at Christchurch, I had been out of school for about 5 years. That was when levels were coming into play, and I didn't really know much about the assessment side of things. And so in my interview, it was a group interview. I did well on the collective work at the assembly. I did well on the in-tray task. I did well on the lesson. I totally bombed on the group task, which was about assessment, because I did not have a clue. And it showed that I didn't have a clue, because when we were doing the group task, my role was to introduce the other people. And so I was kind of almost passing on this job to the other candidates that were with me, because assessment just wasn't my strong point. However, when it came to the interview went well. And at the end, when I was asked, what are your areas for development? My answer was assessment. And I made it clear that if somebody sits with me and goes through what that looks like, you can guarantee that I will pick it up really quickly. And I got the job. And the executive head teacher worked with me for the next 6 months or so to make sure that I was well versed in assessment. Now, me and assessment are like that. We are best buddies. But I was brave enough to admit at the time that it wasn't my strong point. And I think if I'd have seen a person specification and seen assessment on there and thought, you know what, I'm not ready, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. So it's about recognising that you don't have to be the finished package. That's the whole point of development. That's the whole point of promotion. That's the whole point of being able to recognise where your gaps are, is that when you get into the position, you learn. Even in my role as a head teacher now, this is my 5th year. And it's only now that I can say, yeah, I kind of have really got a grip on the finance side of things. I went into the role, you know, having an idea about, you know, how to manage a budget for the curriculum, but to know how to manage a multi-million-pound budget for a whole school and how to make sure that, you know, we stayed in surplus, that was something I learned over a period of time. So it's about recognising that you don't have to be the finished package. I think sometimes, if we can skip down to the next slide, we kind of have to recognise, and the next one, that there are things that get in our way. The doubt, the uncertainty, the comparison, the imposter syndrome, all these things that will stop us from moving forward. But ultimately, what we have to do is go down to the next slide, is kind of say, okay, I need to put all these things to one side and not allow them to stop me. Because if we allow doubt or uncertainty or comparison or imposter syndrome to stop us, what will happen is in 5 years' time, we'll be in the same position and we'll be looking back thinking, what if? And I never want to be in a position where I think, what if? My kind of theory is, what's the worst that can happen? You apply for a job, you don't get it, but what you do gain is the experience and the benefit of knowing, okay, this is what I need to do next time. So for me, it's a case of recognising that you will be the one that knows that you are ready. The people around you will be able to recognise when you're ready. But when you are ready, as we go on to the next speaker, you'll be ready to fill out that application form.